as we know, Stephen's very generous enough to talk to us about WinJUPOS, which is, for those who do Planetary, is a very powerful tool, so, which I don't know very much about, so I'm learning here as well. So, without further messing about ado, we'll hand you over to Stephen.
Okay, like Sean said, I'm just going to give a talk about WinJUPOS. I'll start with just a quick overview of what it's for and what it's mainly used for, and some of its extra features. And then I'm going to go on and basically give a tutorial on derotation. So I'll do a live derotation, doing a bunch of different methods. Jupiter's are very dynamic planets. The features on it are always changing, and people have been monitoring and recording these changes for quite some time. I think, was it the late 1800s records go back to? And so the JUPOS project is, their goal is to archive and record all these, all the data. And WinJUPOS is the software that they use for taking the measurements and storing it into the database. They've been doing it for quite some time. Originally it was pencil and paper, and I think a guy named Grisha Han in about 1994 came up with the WinJUPOS software, which has just made things so much easier to record and stuff. It's completely an amateur project, so it's just regular people like you and me taking our everyday images and posting them online, and other people will come in and take these pictures that we've posted and take measurements from them, and they just get all recorded into the database. So some things that you can do with WinJUPOS. It can help you prepare for an observation with its ephemerides and planning of observation modules. It can record and calculate the positions, the features and positions on the planets, aid in complex image processing, which is the derotation. You can produce maps of the surface, and it will do drift alignment, so calculate how features are moving around on the surface of the planet. So if I just bring up WinJUPOS here, we've got the ephemerides, which shows a whole bunch of data from the planet. So if we just start up here, you've got your dates, time in universal time, your geographical location. So I'll set this to the shore, and just some movements for the graphics option. This window here, it gives you the central meridian locations. Most of this stuff is way above my head, but I'm sure some of you would be able to use the data. Image captioning. Oh, I haven't got this. I actually use the image captioning for when I post my images online. You can take values like the central meridian, the altitude that the planet was at, the diameter, so the size of the planet of your image. So when you're posting your images online, a lot of people like to have this information included with it. It helps the measurers know the exact details of the image that they're measuring. Because if they don't have this information, it's basically just a pretty picture. We've got coordinates of the moons,
Does it store that data when you upload it?
This data, it's embedded in the image. So when I post an image, I'll have the image itself, and then just written in the caption below the image, the information here. I don't think I've actually got any finished ones on here. No, they're on the other computer. The graphics window, real-time graphics representation of what you should be seeing. This is really nice for planning your sessions, because you can see when there's transients and things happening. You can also enter any time and date to see what was happening. So if we want to see what was happening back in 1990, this is what the planet looked like. You can also take your own images, make a map of them, and map it to this. So you can have your own pictures on the surface of the planets. So you can get a more realistic representation of what the current features of Jupiter look like. And there's ephemerids for all the different celestial bodies: Sun, Mercury, Venus, Moon, Mars. So that information is there for all of the solar system objects. So for the planning of observations, let's just go back here. It lets you compute a specific time of a central meridian transit. So you can find a specific feature and know when you can view it. For example, the Juno satellite has got an orbit coming up on the 21st of this month. And it is passing through, have I got the information here? Central meridian, here we go. Central meridian, 316.4 degrees on CM3. So if you want to know when you can image Jupiter at the same time Juno is taking images, you would use this module. So NASA's got a website with a spreadsheet of all the missions on it, and it will tell you the reference system and the latitude that you need and the dates. You can just fill in the information, hit the compute button, and these are the times of day that you should be out imaging to get that information. Places like the British Astronomical Association and NASA themselves like to have images taken from ground observers to compare with what they're seeing on their from their images on the satellite. And the Juno project actually lets anybody upload their images, which is great. There's hundreds or thousands of them there. So if you want to contribute to it, you can grab the information, plan yourself out a observation, and image the correct location of the planets to help out with their science. Another feature of WinJUPOS is creating maps or flat fields of the surface. This particular map was made by the British Astronomical Association in preparation for Juno's previous orbit. So they took a whole bunch of ground-based images. This looks like, you can see how it's a little bit fuzzy where they've blended them together. So it looks like they've taken 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 different images, flattened them out, and noted certain features and positions so they can compare this information with the information that Juno gets. Creating maps like these is relatively easy, and if you've done a derotation, you've actually got the image measurement files to create a flat map as well. And if I've got time at the end, which I probably will, I can go over making maps as well if anyone's interested in that. I'll keep pushing the wrong buttons. So the main reason us as photographers use WinJUPOS is for the derotation. So why do we derotate? It's because our targets are moving, and if we take exposures that are too long, we get smearing of the image and it blurs. So we have to limit, we're limited to the length of exposure we can take. For Jupiter, it's around 2 or 3 minutes. Saturn, about 5 minutes. And Mars is also about 5 minutes. It depends on the equipment you're using and how far or close it is to us at the moment. But they're just general rules of thumbs. But we always want those longer exposures to help with our lucky imaging and increase that signal-to-noise ratio so we can sharpen up the images more. Some helpful prerequisites to do before imaging. Make sure your computer clock is as accurate as it can be. This just helps with WinJUPOS knowing the actual position and helps with its calculations. I use a program called Dimension 4, which syncs my laptop every time I boot it up and every 60 minutes after that. So this is it down here. And if we look at the history over the entire time, you can see that my computer's clock doesn't hold its time. So if it's been off for a week or so, I can be 20, 30 seconds out. And in terms of derotation, that could make quite a big difference. I also use it for if I'm doing DSO imaging and I capture an asteroid or a comet or something, I want the times to be as accurate as possible there. So just it's not a necessity, but it's definitely something that helps out. And if you can keep your computer clock as accurate as possible, the better. Another thing to do is change the settings in your acquisition software, SharpCap, Firecapture, to name your files in a WinJUPOS format. Once again, it's not necessary to do this, but it makes things a lot easier when importing your images into WinJUPOS because the images don't have metadata in them. So WinJUPOS pulls all the information it needs out of the file name itself. So in, not that one, that one's expired. In SharpCap, that was loud. Can I mute?
Working on it. It happened.
That'll fix it.
You should be good now.
Yeah. So yeah, in SharpCap, under the settings, under file names, right here, it's got create WinJUPOS compatible file names. And it's going to change the way all your files are named, which will be the date and the time, So that's a universal time, not local time, and that's universal date. Can't quite see here. The next one is going to be any extra information such as the observer's code, or whether you're imaging in RGB, or for like SharpCap's calling it Jupiter, which will probably be your target name here. And in fire capture, that setting is under here as well. So we've got just a little tick box, WinJUPOS file naming, and this overrides all the other file naming options you've got in fire capture. The WinJUPOS naming it's pretty standard. You'll find a lot of people use it, and it's pretty easy to identify your targets and everything. So I've had no problems using the default JUPOS naming rather than the other information that you can add to the file names. But yeah, those are just two things that will make using WinJUPOS a little bit easier. So the process to derotate a video is you take your video, you acquire your data. You're still limited to your 2 or 3 minutes, depending on what you're doing. You stack your video, just like you normally would when processing it. You process the stacked image, depending on how you want to do it. You use your wavelets, you can do deconvolution, you can jump into Photoshop or GIMP and use any form of sharpening. And then you repeat the method for all of the videos that you've acquired. Whether that's over the space of an hour and you've got 20 videos or 10 videos, it doesn't really matter. You then use WinJUPOS to make an image measurement of those images that you've stacked. You load the image measurement file into the derotation module, which will then spit out a new stacked image. And then you can take that new stacked image, which will have a much higher signal-to-noise ratio, and you can just finish off your processing. So you can apply wavelets to it again, you can use a nice unsharp mask, and you don't have to worry about the noise being pushed up so much. So I'll give an example of how derotation works. So when you first load up WinJUPOS, the very first time it will ask you which celestial body you want to work with and where you want to save the information. After that, the celestial body is selected under Programs. So if we go to Jupiter, under the Recording menu, you've got Image Measurements. So we can bring that up. I'll reset this. And this is our Image Measurement module. Here we've got the date, the time that the image was acquired, your geographical location, and the extra information that comes with the file, RGB, observer, that kind of stuff. So if we open up an image, these are ones that I stacked earlier. Just to try and exaggerate what WinJUPOS can do, these are only the best 10% of my video stack. So there's only about 500 frames in each one of these stacks. So I want to go into the wavelets, the ones that I've processed. So you can see there's a little bit of information there, but not a lot. And if I try and pull out more information, it just gets really grainy because there's low signal to noise ratio. the next step is to take this outline here. Oh, sorry. Yeah, the next step is to set your date and time. Because I've got the WinJUPOS file naming, you can see that it's automatically pulling the correct time out of the file name. If you don't have the file names set in a WinJUPOS compatible format, you are going to have to enter this information, otherwise derotation will not work. You also need to set the geographical location that the image was taken at. And we can set the frame, the outline, to match the image. So you've got your arrow keys, which move the outline around, page up, page down, make it bigger and smaller. N and P, rotate it, and backspace flips it. So sometimes because we're imaging from the southern hemisphere, our poles are going to be opposite to if someone was imaging in the northern hemisphere, our cameras might be in upside down. So we can just do that. Jupiter, and this is the only planet that WinJUPOS does this with, has an auto-align feature. So if we go outline frame, automatic detection, it will do that for you. And down in the bottom right-hand corner here, you can see some information about your image. And we can see that my pixel scale is, what is that, 0.19 degrees per pixel. Seconds per pixel, arc seconds per pixel. So I would have been imaging this with a 2.5 times Barlow, giving me a focal length of about 4 meters on an 8-inch RC. I think a good pixel scale is about 0.18. I think it was Liam that was saying that on Facebook. I think it is really. But the more you enlarge it, the fuzzier your details are going to get, because it comes down to your the resolution that your mirror can pick up. So once you've got your outline in place, you can set the limb compensation. This just affects the contrast of the limb around the outside of the planets. It's a wee bit of trial and error. I use 0.65, which is a number that Christopher Goh, who's another planetary imager, he recommends 0.65, and I've found that works relatively well for my images. It does. It's turning it off and on is just a visual display. If I change this with the display on, it should be getting lighter and darker if I go the other way. Yeah. And unfortunately, and I can't actually type in a value. So you can see the limb there. So we'll go back to... Now, that tick box is just a preview for setting this. So I assume because the preview's not really changing much between 0.1 and 0.65, it's not going to make a big difference for this particular image. So what's positions? This is for measurements, something I don't touch. I don't really have much knowledge of. Miscellaneous measurements. Let's say we wanted to zoom in, find out the size of the red spot. Here we go. Got our measurement, and it is 13,000 kilometers. according to, and then just some extra options. You can enter aperture of your telescope, focal length, pixel size. This doesn't affect the derotation, and it's just there for reference or for data entry, basically. Once you've got your outline in place, you save the image, and so I've got these all saved here, and you repeat it for all of the images that you've taken. So you will push F7 to load an image, load up the image. F11 will automatically align it, and because the information here has been entered because it's in the file name, you just hit F2. F2 and save it, and repeat, rinse and repeat. F11, F2, save, and so on. And you do...
Images do.
What was that?
On the same tab, you've got below load image, you've got add images, which looks as if it's going to add multiple.
Yeah, this is a new feature that's actually recently been added. It wasn't in WinJUPOS, the previous version that I was using. I actually updated a couple of days ago. I did have a look at it, and if I add in multiple images, it seems to stack them, and I don't know what it's actually doing, so I don't know how it's going to affect it. So that's something I'm going to have to look into, but for now, I'm kind of just leaving it because it's something that, like I said, it's a new feature, and I'm not quite sure how that works. So once you've got all your image measurements taken, you'll end up with your folder looking like this. So you've got your measurement file. I guess this is just an XML file for WinJUPOS to read. Each image has got its own measurement. You come to Tools, Derotation of Images, and this brings up the Derotation Module. In here, you just go Edit, Add, and add all the image files, image measurement files that you've just made. So for this one, I've got 10 of them, 2 minutes per video, so that's about 20 minutes of exposure. You can tick this. Doesn't make, in my experience, I haven't found it makes much of a difference, but I generally leave it on. Time to be computed. You can set a time that you want it to derotate to. So if you've got the red spots on the edge of your image and it rotates out of the view during your exposure, but you want to have that red spot in your image, you can change your reference time so that the red spot is visible in the derotation.
Default to the medium point.
It defaults to the medium, yeah. And I think you can, yes, take any one of your frames and set that as the reference. You've got weights. So basically the weighting is how much importance it puts on to that particular frame. If you've got some really good frames and some subpar frames, you can change the weighting on your good frames so it spends more time working on those, less time on the not so good frames. Destination directory. I tend to add another subfolder here because it's going to spit out a file with the same names as some of your exposures, so you don't want to overwrite anything. And it just helps me keep track of everything. File name is, once again, based on the WinJUPOS naming. So you've got your date, your time, your observer, and then the information on the image. And I believe if I change this, it changes the file name.
Does it always output in PNG format?
No, you can change the format down here. But it is a 48-bit PNG, so PNG or TIFF, you're going to get the same, because they are both lossless image. Yeah, PNG and TIFF are both lossless, so you're going to get the same quality image out. Size of your image, basically it's just cropping it. This is auto-populated and it will crop it down. If you've got moons that you want to keep, you can make it larger.
When you say auto-populates, does it auto-crop it?
It auto-crops it, yeah.
It does it up to planet across some space? So
Yeah. It leaves a little bit of spacing on the edges, but it does fill in that auto crop. Like I said, if you've got moons that you would like to keep in the image, you're going to need to resize this. WinJUPOS won't derotate the moons though, and it also has issues with shadows, because the shadows are moving at different speeds of the features. Your shadows may end up stretched or elongated, and because the moons are in different space to the planet, you may end up with 3 different moons, or the moons separated. Image orientation, do you want north at the top or south at the top? For us in the southern hemisphere, we're used to seeing south at the top, but all your NASA images and all the ones you see in magazines, scientific images, the general consensus is north at top. So if you're submitting to Juno, British Astronomical Society Association, or any of the big planetary databases, they generally like you to have north at the top. And then you've just got the last one, stretch luminescence. I tend to have this one turned off because it makes my image too bright, and I can show you an example of what it does after I hit compile. So once you've got all these set, which are pretty much automatically done for you, hit the compile image, and there's my derotated image. Now it doesn't look like much more than the individual stacks right now, but the signal to noise ratio is much, much better than the other ones. I'll stretch it and show you what that does. You can see how it's kind of washed everything out. Makes it quite a bit brighter. I tend to leave it turned off because of that, but your results may vary. So once you've got this derotated image, you can then, oh, that's the stretch one. You can then take it into any of your processing tools and finalize it, and that was my final image with a little bit of extra wavelets. I did a histogram equalization to pull out the contrast a little bit, and then I used a very, very slight denoise on it. But you can see it's pulled out a lot of details around here. We've got spots from here, and if we look at the original wavelets, so what time was this? 08:34. So that would be, closest one would be this one. So that's stretched and that's derotated. And if I just, where is it, sharpen? If I sharpen it, oops. Shift S. You can see it does not have that signal in there to pull that detail out. Like I said, this was really exaggerated. Only about 500 frames in this particular one. But even if you're still doing your best 15%, 20%, you are going to get that little bit of extra detail out. It's also good if you've got nights of bad seeing, where you can only really get those best 500 frames, that best 5-10%. And so if you're out there for 2 hours and you only capture 1,000 frames, but you only capture about 5,000 frames, but those 5,000 frames are spread over 20 minutes, you can still get a good image on a bad seeing night. Just a little bit more processing, and I think that's not too bad, to be honest. So that's derotation of a color image. Now, Tony asked if I could go over the derotation of images taken with a monochrome camera. There are actually two different ways you can do that. The first way is to take all your images, limit your video time to about 30 seconds per filter. So your total acquisition time is still within that 2 to 3 minutes worth of total exposure time. You then stack them individually like you would a regular color image, process those stacked images in Registacks or whatever tool you use, bring those 3 individual RGB images into Photoshop, align them, and create a color image, and then derotate those individual color images like I've just done here. And because you've stayed within that 2-minute window, 3-minute window, you don't have to worry about smearing or rotation of the planet.
You don't get any colour separation?
No.
Doing that?
That's the way Christopher Goh does his. He limits his images to about 30 seconds a filter. And because you're using high frame cameras, that 30 seconds is quite a lot of frames. You're capturing 100, 150 frames a second. It does require, well, like any monochrome work, it does require a lot more processing because you are doing 3 times the amount of work, 1 for each filter, or even 4 if you're taking a luminescence. But yeah, if you look at Christopher Goh's work, it speaks for itself. The other option is to use the derotation of RGB frames in WinJUPOS. I don't actually have any monochrome data of my own, but I did jump onto NASA's website this afternoon and get some Hubble images. So these are hydrogen alpha, oxygen 3, and sulfur 2. So you've got your red, green, and your blue. Exposure times vary from about, I think, 4 seconds to 30 seconds, depending on the filter. And we can go through and see if we can derotate them. So if I just bring up these images again, if you keep an eye on the red spot, you can see that there's quite a bit of movement. This was taken at 1406, 1413, and 1420. So what's that, about 15 minutes? So if we were to stack these together, combine them in Photoshop, they would smear. None of the features align properly. So it requires derotation if we're going to do it. So if I come into image measurement, we'll open an image F7. Load up the red image. Yeah. Now I've gone and I've entered the time and date information into the file name. So you can see that WinJUPOS has automatically picked it up. So it's November the 20th, 2020 at 14:06. Because these were taken in orbit, I have no idea what to put for the geographical location. So let's just do all zeros. Now if I hit F11, you can see it's working out the location of the frame. F2 to save that. And we'll do that with the other 3 frames. And you can see that the image resolution of this is much higher than what was taken with the 8. Yeah. And the last one, F11. F2. So now we've got the image measurement files. We'll go Tools, Derotation of RGB frames. We'll reset this and add them in. So, red channel, green channel, and blue channel. Optimize the measurements. I didn't grab a luminance because I have no idea where to find that data. Derotate, do north at top, and you reckon it's going to work?
This one here, does that indicate that it's already identified this rotation?
Yeah, the red line is the position of the red frame. So that'll be the central meridian of the red frame. The blue line is the central meridian of the blue frame, and the green one you can see is rotating here, and there we go. So it looks like there's a little bit of fringing on the outside.
So is that why Chris doesn't do it this way?
I'm not 100% sure. I think the reason Chris doesn't do it this way is because you need to make an image measurement file for every RGB and luminance frame. But in saying that, you need to process everything in Photoshop beforehand, whereas this way you don't have to do the Photoshop processing.
Scripting here to batch your processing. Is there any way to script, say, all the images in this folder, go through, load them all, press L11 and save the image file so you don't have to sit there doing it one. It's bizarre that nobody would have gone, well, I'll automate that entirely repetitive process.
I haven't seen any scriptings, but I personally have made macros on my keyboards at home because there's shortcut keys for everything. So when I'm in my image measurement file, I hit one key and it will do the F7, load up the file, F11 to automatically align it. It then waits for 5 seconds for the processing to be done, F2, enter. And so I'm just basically sitting there tapping away at a key and it does everything for me. So if we zoom right in, we can see that it has got the red spot aligned. There's no smearing in there. So how close can we get? And this is just straight raw data from Hubble. There was no sharpening, no extra processing from that, which what you would do that before you're processing, but I've only had the JPEGs to work with. I couldn't figure out a way to load the Hubble FITS files. So this is just working straight from a JPEG. I suspect the reason there's a little bit of fringing is the image measurement frames slightly off on the edges, which can be tweaked and fine-tuned. But yeah, for a quick test, I think that works well. And then the last way to derotate, and I don't know of anyone that actually does it this way, derotation of video stream. So you can take a video that's longer than your 3 minutes. You can take a 20-minute long video and derotate it in here. In order to use this, you still need your image mapping file, your image measurement files, which means you need to grab a still frame or process some of the image. And because you're working with video, it takes a long time to go through each frame. So if you had, let's say you had a 20-minute long video and you were capturing at 100 frames a second, it's going to take a long time for those, every single one of those frames, 10,000 frames or whatever it is, to be registered. When you're doing it the other way, you're only working with the good frames. You've already done auto stack it. You've discarded and thrown away all the bad frames you don't need. It's much faster, and it's just an easier way of doing it. But if you do want to do it this way and you have a powerful computer, you pick your video. You pick the image measurement file which corresponds to that video. You don't actually have, actually I might, if I come here and I...
Don't rely on the video being perfectly stable though, already having been processed to send to the image so that you didn't have, because if you do an image measurement file, it tells you where the disk is.
Yeah.
Or does it have to, or is it just that you have to do an image measurement file for the first frame of the video to get the starting alignment right?
Well, if you're
all over the place during the video.
Yeah, if you're using fire capture can align during the capture process.
It's still not even just the atmospheric noise,
The wobbling
thing around.
Yeah, I do know that it will stack it, so it does have the ability to stack, so I suspect it probably has the ability to align, and that alignment process is probably what's slowing it down as well. So I've actually got the image measurement for that video. So that was...
That's a different day.
Yeah.
From the video you chose the video.
Oh, from the 5th. I want that one, don't I? Yeah, there we go. 82508, yeah. So if I wanted to, I could derotate this video. A few options: compensate for field rotation on an alt-as mount, your single frame calibration, and then you can output the corrected video or just output the stacked image. It's stacking every single frame in the video though, so you can't tell it I only want the 15% best frames. So that stacked image isn't going to be as good as if you were stacking and auto stack it.
From a point of view of, when you say takes a long time,
yeah.
you're talking hours?
Well,
days?
you can see the progress bar right here.
Oh.
So for this particular video, which is only 2 minutes, you're probably looking at maybe 10 to 15 minutes for it to do it. This isn't the best computer in the world. It's just a little 4-core, 5200, and we're only boosting up to 2.5 gigahertz. if you had a big, powerful desktop computer, a Ryzen 2 or a 10th generation Intel, something that's got 6 cores, 12 processors, 32 gigs of RAM, it would go much, much faster. But it's still a slower process than stacking your images, sharpening them, and then derotating the individually stacked images.
In terms of sequence of events, is it definite that you would sharpen, then derotate, or is it possible that it might be better off derotating than sharpening? Do you know
All of the tutorials that I've read and videos that I've watched suggest that you sharpen before you derotate. And you can, because you're restacking your images, you can actually push your sharpening further than you normally would. So if you have a bit of noise in your sharpened images, when you derotate, it's going to take that noise out. So yeah, I'm going to cancel that because that's going to take quite a while. So that's all the methods of derotation.
It's kind of simple, it's kind of easier.
It is.
Than you kind of think it's going to be.
It is really simple to do. Did that answer your questions, Tony, about?
Yeah, also, I've heard a lot of Sean's presentations on planetary imaging.
Yeah.
And he's kind of alluded to WinJUPOS, but never actually discussed it to an extent. I've always got the impression that he's been a bit scared to do it.
Yeah, that's true. I always felt I wasn't sure whether I wanted to go there because if you get a certain point where you're creating a constructed image rather than a real. But in actual fact, looking at it here, that's clearly not the case. All it's really doing is just adjusting. Stacking. It's no more
stacking.
Stacking. Really.
Stacking with auto stack it. I'll just bring that up. Where are we? I know I've got it on here somewhere. There we go. If you have this little box here ticked, quality estimator, it's actually making a composite of your image. It's taking the best part of the image for each alignment point box. So you may actually end up with an image that has the best parts of the frame from alignment point 3 and alignment point 4 on frame 1 matched up with alignment point 6 and alignment point 7 on frame 6. So it is compositing and redrawing your image from the best it possibly can. If you don't want the composite, click global, but your image isn't going to be as good. And I don't know if any of you have ever stacked an image and found it's got grids or a weird grid-like pattern on it. That's because it's composited from frames of different brightness, and it hasn't been able to track features properly and everything. Another way to fix that is to choose global as well. But yeah.
Well, on the basis of this, I'll definitely, next time I'm doing some computing, I'll definitely give this a solid go and see what difference it makes.
Yeah, it does add a little bit more work, but in my opinion, I think it's worth it. One thing I do like to do is capture 2 hours or so worth of Jupiter and then derotate in sets of 10 minutes. So I'll do 2 minutes of video and then derotate five frames together and then make an animation from that. So you get the two.
And the whole feature you were going to talk about?
The mapping?
It's just coming up great.
Yeah.
So you've got a few minutes.
Yeah.
Can you grab 5 minutes just to give us a quick look at the mapping?
The mapping? Yeah.
That's really quite an interesting and exciting feature, I think.
So under analysis, map computation. So I'll reset this. And because WinJUPOS works mostly from those image measurement files, we can take the image measurement files that I already created in here, bring them up, and you've got your different type of projection, the cylindrical, equatorial, polar, the latitude scale, map orientation, we'll go north at the top again. Page layout is just your graph and background scale, that kind of stuff. The longitude of the left margin is where you want it to start on the left-hand side of the graph, and these two help with the blending of the different images. So we'll just compile the map. And there is my map, and if we can see, if we set this to 150 and compile it again, there we go. There is a map of my...
So I assume there's a definite period of time you need to take the capture zone to get a full, like 6 hours, where you get enough to actually link it all up.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why when maps such as this one were made, it was taken using multiple images from different observers. It may have been taken from different parts of the world, but different, yeah, potentially over different nights as well. They try to get the most accurate map. You want to try and keep it all on the same night, and because you've got so many people uploading their images to places like Juno and Planetary Database and submitting them to the British Astronomical Association. They've got all those images to make the maps, and they don't bother imaging or observing. They take other people's work and then they write their papers and use it based on other people's things. So it's a big collaborative effort with this kind of stuff. But yeah, with this particular map, I probably would have stacked more than 500 frames, because you can see it's not very sharp here. You can get a much better one. In fact, I can probably...
I reckon on a good clear night, at the right time of year, you can start when it gets dark and get enough data together to get a full thing out.
Definitely.
Because there's been times when you've got Jupiter in the sky for, all night, pretty much.
So, it's stretched from when I showed what the luminescence one does, but there you go. It's got the more detail there, and you can probably do it with the Hubble as well. One quick tip, almost forgot about. If you're derotating Mars, take an exposure that's really, really overexposed. So you've got the moons in the frame. And when you're doing your image measurement, and you've got your... can I bring this up without a... can't ever live in that. You're trying to align this to Mars, very difficult. But if you do overexpose the image to bring out the moons, use the moons to align the frame with. It's the way Damien Peach does it, and Christopher Goh learnt about it last year and was posting all over Facebook about it. If you've got more than one moon, you're going to get an incredibly accurate alignment frame, measurement frame. But if you don't have the moons, you're going to try and have to match up the planetary features. What was that?
Is that what those dots are?
These little dots here, yeah. If I zoom in.
Okay, so you haven't actually got the moon on your...
No, my frame ends here.
Right, okay.
So yeah, you can take just a single one, align it with that, and then when you load up all your subsequent images, don't change your guide frame. Don't change the outline. And if you've got a good equatorial mount and the images were all aligned properly and auto-stack it, the alignment frame should match up to all the subsequent images. So yeah, and it's the same with Saturn, aligned to the rings. The Cassini division makes it really good to to bring up the frame. So yeah, any other questions?
Can you do a quick setup?
Have we got time?
Not really. Have we got I assume there's another meeting happening.
Yes.
Yeah.
What's happening for the second meeting?
Bill's got his software talk.
Yeah.
You're doing that here?
Yeah.
Oh, we should probably pass over Bill, because we're past 8 now,
Yeah.
so yeah. Been a while.
Sure.
Yeah, I think we should probably pass on to Bill now, because it's rude otherwise. Thank you very much, Steve. No,
No worries.
that's really interesting. I'll definitely be giving it a go for my next imaging session, and I'll let you know how it goes and show you the results, because looking at what you can get there, hopefully you might be able to see something quite spectacular out of it. All right, thanks very much.